The briefing room was cold, its silence heavy with unspoken history. The air smelled faintly of coffee and gun oil, the scent of war rooms and restless nights. A dozen officers sat around the long oak table, their eyes fixed on the young woman standing before them. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what she carried in her briefcase. Outside, the storm raged over the military base, lightning flashing against the tall windows as if nature itself demanded to witness what was about to unfold. She took a breath, steady, measured, and began to speak. But before she could get past her first line, the door swung open, and the general himself walked in. General Nathaniel Cross, a man known for his iron will and eyes that could silence a battlefield, entered the room with his usual aura of command. Every officer in the room stiffened, saluting in perfect unison. He gave a curt nod and motioned for them to sit. His reputation preceded him, a war hero, decorated with medals, but burdened with ghosts from campaigns long forgotten by most. He was a man who had seen too much, done too much, and trusted too little. His gaze finally landed on the young woman at the front, Captain Ilara Morgan. She met his stare with quiet defiance. For a moment, the room held its breath. The general interrupted her introduction with the tone of a man too busy for pleasantries. "Get to the point, Captain," he said coldly. "We don't have time for sentiment." But she didn't flinch. Instead, she reached into her briefcase and unfolded an old, worn-out map, its corners torn, its surface faded by years of dust and travel. The officers leaned forward as she spread it across the table. Then the impossible happened. The general, the man who never broke composure, froze. His hand twitched. His expression faltered, because there, on the lower right corner of the map, was his own signature, written 20 years ago. The storm outside roared as if echoing the tremor in his heart. Memories clawed their way back. Memories of another briefing, another map, another mission. He had signed that map the night before a failed rescue operation in a small border village. An operation that had cost the lives of dozens of soldiers, including a young lieutenant named Aaron Morgan. That name struck like a bullet through his chest. Morgan. The surname on her uniform was not a coincidence. She was his daughter. Ilara didn't speak right away. She let the silence gnaw at him, let the weight of the past crush the room's authority. When she finally began, her voice carried both the fragility of grief and the steel of purpose. She explained how her father had led a team into a no-return zone after that mission failed, how he had saved civilians, but vanished in the chaos. For years, her family received nothing but a folded flag and the words, "He died a hero." But Ilara never believed it ended there. She had spent her entire career piecing together fragments of that operation. Declassified reports, forgotten radio signals, abandoned posts, all leading back to that single map the general had signed. Her mission briefing wasn't just strategy. It was truth, justice, and closure. She was here to propose a search and recovery mission into the same region her father had disappeared, the one the general had sealed off permanently, calling it irretrievable ground. The general's jaw tightened as she spoke, but his eyes betrayed him. Beneath the stoic exterior, guilt flickered like dying embers. He remembered Aaron Morgan vividly, the brave lieutenant who had volunteered for an impossible mission. And he remembered the promise he had made to a young soldier as the helicopters lifted off. "I'll bring you home." He had failed that promise. Ilara's voice broke slightly when she unfolded the next piece of evidence, her father's final message, recovered from an encrypted military channel just months ago. The static-filled recording played through the speakers and everyone fell silent. "If anyone finds this, tell my daughter I kept fighting. Tell her I didn't give up." The general's hands trembled visibly. That voice, carried across decades, was like hearing the ghost of a promise whispering through time. The room was no longer a briefing hall. It was a confession chamber. Ilara looked at him not as a soldier, but as the man who could have saved her father and didn't. Yet her eyes weren't filled with hatred. They were filled with something far heavier, disappointment. "Sir," she said, her tone unwavering, "you signed this map once to lead men into battle. I'm asking you to sign it again, to bring them home." For the first time in years, General Cross couldn't speak. He looked at the map, the faded lines, the ink of his own hand, the ghost of a mission that haunted him every night. He remembered the screams, the fire, the orders he had given that cost lives. But now, before him stood the daughter of the man he had failed, the living embodiment of everything he'd tried to bury. Slowly, he reached for a pen, his hand trembling. The room watched in stunned silence as the old soldier bent forward and signed his name once more. Right above his own faded signature from decades past. For Aaron, he whispered. Days later, the mission began. Against political pushback, resource shortages, and the general's failing health, the recovery team set out for the borderlands. The terrain was merciless, ravaged by storms, scarred by war. Yet every step Alara took carried her closer to a truth she had chased her entire life. The general insisted on joining her, despite protests. Some debts, he said, can't be repaid from a desk. Together they walked the same ground that had once swallowed her father's battalion. As the search stretched into weeks, hope began to fade. Supplies dwindled, morale faltered. One night, as they camped beneath a canopy of shattered stars, Alara found the general sitting alone, staring at the tattered map. His eyes reflected the flames like two dying suns. He was the best of us, he said quietly. Your father. He deserved better. She didn't reply. She simply placed a hand on the map, tracing the same path her father once took, and felt something in the earth shift beneath her fingertips. By dawn, they discovered it, a half-collapsed bunker swallowed by roots and silence. Inside, they found remnants of uniforms, rusted weapons, and a single metal tag engraved with Lit Aaron Morgan. The general fell to his knees, tears cutting through the dust on his face. He had led countless missions, seen countless graves, but none struck him like this. Alara knelt beside him, holding the tag to her chest. In that moment, the past and present blurred. A father's last stand, a daughter's redemption, and a soldier's long-delayed homecoming. When they returned to base, the world seemed quieter. The storm had passed. The general personally placed Aaron Morgan's recovered insignia into Alara's hands during the final ceremony. No words were spoken and none were needed. The salute he gave her was not from a superior officer, but from a man seeking forgiveness. She returned it, tears glistening like medals of her own. As the crowd dispersed, Alara stood alone by the memorial wall, tracing her father's name now freshly engraved beside the recovered heroes. She whispered, "You're home, Dad." Behind her, the general lingered for a moment longer before walking away, his shoulders lighter, his heart finally at peace. For the first time in decades, he allowed himself to breathe, not as a soldier, but as a man who had finally kept his promise. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the sacrifices, the promises, or the love that outlives war, please take a moment to share it. Your support helps stories like this reach more hearts that need them. Special request: comment below. What promise would you still keep, no matter how many years have passed? And remember, some maps lead not to places, but to the truths we've long forgotten to seek.